from Syngenta. So Eric has been with Syngenta for 16 years. He is our Syngenta horticultural specialist for our territory. I know he's fairly new in the role, but I know he's got a big background in Syngenta to help bring forth a lot of the products we are using in potatoes and the Bradford Marsh here today. So without any further ado, I'll get Eric queued up here.
And thank you for the opportunity to join you on the Homes Agro Next Level Ag series. My name is Eric Phillips. I'm a horticultural specialist with Syngenta, and happy to be joining you today to talk about our potato and specialty product line. As an agronomic and horticultural specialist, my role is to focus on the agronomy, technical support and sales support of our potato and specialty portfolio, predominantly with a focus in potatoes, mock vegetables, apples, and grapes, with ultimately the effort to partner with Homes Agro to support you in growing the best crop. As a horticultural specialist, I'm new to this role as of January, but have been with Syngenta going on 16 years, having had the opportunity to work in different functions, whether it be production and supply, and most recently as a product manager for our fungicide and insecticide portfolio. So while I'm new to sales and new to agronomy as of January, as I said, if I don't know the answer on the spot, I certainly know who in Syngenta does and could be able to solve that for you. For those that I haven't met, you'll see my contact information is on the right-hand side of the screen here, and would encourage you to reach out whenever you need to. So for today's presentation, what I'm hoping to cover over the next 20 minutes or so is an introduction to the adepidin molecule, our exciting new fungicide, with ultimately it coming to the market through Miravis Duo, our new fungicide in the marketplace. Want to touch base on Arundus Ultra, our premier late blight product, and then close at the end with a review of some of the support material that Syngenta has made available to you for the 2021 season. So we'll get right into it. And for those that haven't heard or haven't been introduced to the adepidin molecule, this is a molecule that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last going on 7 or 8 years now, and really excited about the fact that it's ultimately introduced or changed the space when it comes to group 7s. What we've done with this molecule is taken the best properties of previous molecules and ultimately formulated it and developed it to deliver effectiveness in 3 areas: power, stamina, and spectrum. And so when we think about this molecule itself, when we talk about power on the left-hand side here, we're talking about the efficacy of the molecule, a high level of performance, and ultimately the potency that you as a farmer use and make the adoption of a group 7 is because you're looking for that effective control. And the adepidin molecule was engineered to deliver that efficacy. But it was also engineered to deliver stamina. And here we're talking about the long-lasting residual activity that we've typically seen, or most recently seen, with this class of chemistry. If I think back to when solatenol was introduced, right? Products like Aprovia, Provia Top, Elatis, and Trivapro contain solatenol. And when we introduced that molecule, we talked about a harder working, longer lasting molecule. And that was because of these lipophilic properties that that compound had, which we've engineered into adepidin so that it delivers those characteristics as well. But what truly sets adepidin apart from any other molecule in this class is its spectrum of activity. And so we're talking about activity on difficult to control diseases, diseases like fusarium head blight, diseases like sclerotinia, botrytis, and many of the leaf diseases that I'll be talking about here today. And so it's a combination, right, of those 3 components that make this truly a unique molecule. And of course, the adaptogen molecule itself ultimately underpins the suite of products that you see here in front of you, which is the Miravis brand family. And again, if you grow something other than potatoes or specialties, you probably heard from Syngenta talk about Miravis Ace in wheat or Miravis Neo in corn. But of course, you can see a whole suite of different products that we have in the marketplace and widely available for you, depending on the different challenging crops that you have or diseases that you're looking to tackle. Of course, on the right-hand side is today's topic, which is Miravis Duo, our new potato and vegetable fungicide. So let's dig into Miravis Duo and uncover a bit more about what it is and what it delivers. And so here you see adaptogen and difenoconazole, so group 7 and a group 3 mixed together to make Miravis Duo. And together, that combination brings high performance and broad spectrum activity. And as a result of that spectrum and that performance, ultimately at the end of the day, that provides you peace of mind. Peace of mind knowing that you're being protected with a highly effective fungicide. Miravis Duo is registered on a whole host of different crops and has activity, as I said, on a broad list of diseases as well. And goes back to that spectrum piece that we were talking about before. Its strengths are certainly on diseases like alternaria and powdery mildew, but what we have seen and observed as well is that it does bring robust activity on several other pathogens. What's important to note is that it's a single-use rate. We recommend 0.4 liters per acre across all uses. And when you reflect on the pre-harvest intervals or the number of applications, those are, again, appropriate to the respective crops that they have. And so it's, as I said, a broad label and an all-encompassing label when it comes to making it effective for your use in your operation. In preparation for the 2021 launch, of course, we did some trials last year and want to spend a bit of time talking to you a bit about our experiences. The first one here is in onions. And when we think about onions, of course, problematic disease here of late has been stem phyllium, right? And if you think about the different modes of action and the different tools that you have for stem phyllium, what we heard in the playback from the farmers that had the experience with it last year was they were excited to have a product that had two modes of action that were providing activity on stem phyllium. So both the adaptogen and difenoconazole components of Miravis Duo are bringing activity against stem phyllium. From an application timing perspective, the recommendation here would be in and around that 6-leaf stage, when you're starting to see a bit of that bulb, right? And if it's a normal year, that's typically in and around that July weekend, July long weekend. And for a product like Miravis Duo, we'd love to have it positioned as that first stem phyllium spray. What I would recommend, however, is you do consider the use of a non-ionic surfactant in the tank. Anytime you're working with a crop like onions with that waxy leaf surface, that adjuvant is just going to help the application stick and stay on that leaf. Of course, we also have experience this past year with Miravis Duo in brassica vegetables. And on the left-hand side, you see some of the research that we have collected globally. In this case, these are trials out of the US where Miravis Duo was compared to an untreated check and what was at the time the standard quadris. And we're excited to see that level up in performance when it comes to Miravis Duo over the standard. On the right-hand side is an observation here of some of the late season trial that we did just outside of Cambridge here in Ontario. And of course, you see the quality of that crop being maintained as a result of the application of Miravis Duo. Alternaria inevitably comes at some point in the year, and so it's important to think of a product like Miravis Duo when you're thinking about addressing your alternaria challenges in brassicas. And then last but not least, before we get into potatoes, here's just some information on carrots as well. Very excited about the opportunity Miravis Duo has here in carrots. Very good fit The work last year, of course, a low disease year in 2020, but what we heard playback from the farmer was that he was very happy with the efficacy and the results. And while Quadrus Top still has a great fit in carrots, Miravis Duo is going to also have a great fit as a result of that long-lasting stamina that I spoke to earlier. And recognizing, of course, that we're also in the process of seeing some restrictions on some of the existing tools that we've been using. And so the fact that here we have a new tool in Miravis Duo allows us to effectively manage that crop. Let's get into Miravis Duo now in potatoes specifically, and think about and talk about some of the diseases that it's going to have activity on. You'll see Miravis Duo is registered for control of early blight and brown spot, and then suppression of botrytis and white mold. So when we think about control here, we're talking about above 80% activity. When we're talking about suppression, that's in and around that 60 to 80% level of activity. A convenient single-use rate of that 0.4 liters per acre translates into a 40-acre case, and you can see a couple of the other label suggestions here in terms of its intervals and re-entry intervals. When we think about the difficult to control diseases and the spectrum of diseases with Miravis Duo in potatoes specifically, what we did here for you is give you a visual of what components are delivering what as it comes to the target pathogens. And so, as we list them left to right, we've got early blight, we've got brown spot, we've got white mold, and we've got botrytis. And then on the far right-hand side, highlighted by red where we don't have activity, this is late blight. So Miravis Duo is not a late blight product. It is an early blight, brown spot, white mold, and botrytis product. And you can see when we come to early blight, we've got that blue coloring for adapidin, and as a result, Miravis Duo. And this is where we see a step change in performance on early blight from the adapidin molecule. You see on brown spot, it's a suppression from the adapidin molecule, but here's where the addition of difenoconazole, which brings robust activity on brown spot, the combination ultimately is giving you activity that's robust and equal to commercial standards today. And then the last two, as I said, suppression being white mold and botrytis. You can see in both cases, the adapidin molecule giving you suppression of botrytis and white mold. And then when it comes to difenoconazole component, it's only giving you suppression of white mold and no activity on botrytis. If you were to ask why did we mix it with difenoconazole, one obviously being it's an alternate mode of action, so being a group 3, but here also you see the spectrum. It complements that of the adapidin molecule to give Miravis Duo a really robust and effective label. Looking at some of the work that we've done, as I said, I've had the chance to work with adapidin for several years now. And in the early days, of course, we were comparing it to products in our portfolio. And in the darker green, of course, you see the Miravis Duo bar, providing that early blight activity to step up from those of our other products in our portfolio. And if I can draw your attention to the cluster of dots, right? Here's speaks to the consistency of the consistency and performance of the product, right? That tight cluster suggests that in all those trials, Miravis Duo was providing that level of activity. If as we continued and looked at it a bit further, and this time started to benchmark that against other products in the marketplace, and again are seeing that level up or that step up in terms of performance to other standards in the marketplace. And then most recently in 2020, as we think about some of the yield digs and monitoring that we've done. Now, I've used the term step up, and to have a step up, fundamentally, you have to show a 10x improvement over an existing standard. And we've been able to show that and replicate that in our lab work. As you can see here on the left-hand side, adaptogens providing that 10x improvement over the next effective molecule. And that lab work, as I said, is translated into some of the recent work that we've seen out in the field and some of the performances that we uncovered this past year. On the right here is a summary of some of the digs that we've done over the last year. And while you can see some significant extremes on the positive side for the Miravis Duo experiments this past year. What I would caution, though, our experience in Ontario, weren't at the far ends of the spectrums here, and more in the middle, in and around that 0 to 5% improvement over the standards. When it comes to timing that application and thinking when best to make that application of the Miravis Duo fungicide, of course, got so many other diseases to think about, and certainly rotation is an important consideration. But if we layer on some of those diseases and think about the spectrum of activity that Miravis Duo covers, those top four kind of somewhat overlap, as you can see, towards the latter part of the season. And so if we think about timing that application, really that recommendation for Miravis Duo is that full flower stage, followed by a second application anywhere from 7 to 14 days after. And the reason we make that recommendation is obviously that timing, you get the full spectrum of performance, so the best bang for your buck when it comes to the diseases that it controls. And if you think about how that adaptogen molecule binds and stays in the wax layer of the plant, really that second application following full flower gives you that added extended control and protection for another couple of weeks. Now, we would suggest that if you are making sequential applications of Miravis Duo, that you do follow those either previously or after Miravis Duo with a non-group 7 or non-group 3 fungicide. My last slide here on Miravis Duo and potatoes is, again, just to reflect and highlight some of the experiences that we had with Miravis Duo here in Ontario this past year. A couple of different sites had the opportunity to test it and look at it against different competitors. And in this case, the work done here, we were able to make 2 applications. Again, that first spray at full flower and then 2 weeks later. Well, in this particular trial, we didn't see any yield advantages in the 10-foot digs. What the farmer did observe, of course, was certainly a lot more vigor in the Miravis Duo plants than there was in that of the competitor, and in this case being Lunar Tranquility. I want to now transition into really the other major disease of concern that I'm sure keeps you up at night when you're growing potatoes is, of course, late blight, right? And talk to you a bit about Arondis Ultra in late blight specifically. Arondis Ultra, a combination of 2 active ingredients, mandipropamid, as you've come to know as Revis, and then Arondis being the oxathiopropylene molecule. And together, Arondis Ultra ultimately targets late blight. And while we have a rate range, the common rate at 0.2 liters per acre is typically what we see most farmers adopt. And ultimately what we're getting with Arondis Ultra is that unprecedented residual activity on late blight. What we'll see here shortly is that protection of new growth. And again, if you're not just concerned about potatoes and have some other uses, of course, Arondis Ultra is very effective on downy mildew. To reflect on, again, how it works, of course, both molecules work together, one translaminar, the other translaminar and acropetal activity. And ultimately what that means is the compounds work across the leaf surface from one side to the other, and then also move upwards and outwards into new growth. If you've used Arondis Ultra, of course, you're familiar with its very effective rain-fast properties. And because of its mobility and length of control, there's really no bad time to spray Arondis Ultra. I should say no bad time to apply it preventatively. Certainly Arondis Ultra is not to be used curatively, as it doesn't have curative properties. When you think about and want to demonstrate some of the activity, right, into that new growth. So what we've done here and have pictures of are some pot studies where we were able to monitor the growth of both a treated and an untreated plant that it was essentially inoculated with late blight. And so what you see here, and I've tried to highlight with the arrow, is each of these plants has this red wire or red band around it. And that was when the stage of the plant that it was applied at, and then subsequently inoculated after with late blight. That 15 grams of active ingredients that you see on the 3 pots on the left, that's equivalent to that common rate of 0.2 liters per acre that I was talking about in Arondis Ultra. So we can see over time, of course, the late blight obviously knocking back and overtaking the untreated check, but on the left-hand side, the treated pots, of course, maintaining their foliage and growing successfully. And you can still see that red band again as a result of the new growth and the stage of the plant that it was applied at. And so, not only did Arondis protect the foliage that existed, but it also protected the plant that was growing and also moved into new stems and new leaves. And that's what we're most excited about this molecule and this brand, is the fact that it's protection of that new growth. Now, some observations that we've seen over the last several years, demonstrate that activity and that level of performance on late blight. What we're looking at here is a trial that we conducted here in Ontario. In the dark green, you've got the untreated check. Maybe in the medium green, if for lack of a better term, you've got Arondis Ultra, and then in light green, we have what was the standard in Revis. And in this case, what was applied? So we applied Arondis Ultra on July 13th, and then subsequently followed up with another application on August 4th. And late blight was found in the guard rows, or the untreated guard rows, shortly after the first application. And then, as you can see here, demonstrated in visuals, 13 days after the application is when we started to see the existing standard in Revis start to break. And then certainly by the end of the ratings of the plot, Arondis Ultra certainly holding on, Revis not having the legs that Arondis Ultra does, and ultimately untreated check seeing almost 100% defoliage as a result of late blight. And to give you a visual of what the plants look like, obviously something that we never want to see in a commercial field. But again, the visual gives you an indication of just how high performing Arondis Ultra is when it comes to late blight. Of course, the timing of application is always a tricky one and something that you need to consider. But as I mentioned earlier, right, there was really no bad time to apply Arondis Ultra, other than you must apply it preventatively. We've talked about that rapid vegetative growth stage, get it into the plant and help it protect any of that new growth. And I think that's, we've demonstrated that with the pot studies, and I'm sure you've seen and had that experience on your own farm. We can also consider, perhaps a later application towards the end of the season. That's always a tough time of year, lots going on the farm. And it's nice to have that peace of mind that as you think about heading into desiccation and potentially making that regular application, you don't need to be concerned about late blight, and obviously you'll be protected. What I will remind you here as I close on this slide is, of course, that Arondis Ultra is only registered on late blight, right? So you got to think about fertility, you got to think about other diseases. And so when you do that, again, think about Miravis Duo and Arondis Ultra, ultimately giving you that broad spectrum activity and that 1-2 punch when it comes to some of the most difficult diseases that you have to consider in potatoes. And so in closing, of course, while I did focus the presentation here on Miravis Duo and Arondis Ultra, rest assured that that Syngenta, of course, has you covered from seed care through to post-harvest when it comes to the several challenging diseases that you have to manage. but ultimately, again, when we think about the portfolio, and ultimately my role, my job is again to help you grow the best crop, and with our suite of products, I know that we can do that together. So in closing, I just want to remind you again, my contact information on the right-hand side of the screen. Certainly reach out however you need or when required. Some of those support tools that are available to you from Syngenta. Of course, we've got our website, syngenta.ca, filled with lots of product information. If you're learning or interested about Miravis Duo specifically, or any of our Miravis products, we've got a microsite specifically dedicated to Miravis. The address is there, and it's very mobile friendly as well. We've got quick reference guides. So I spoke about potatoes today and some of our muck vegetables, but again, if you're growing anything else and are interested in our quick reference guides, right now I've got electronic and soft copies available for you. I can email, but ultimately we'll have hard copies here very shortly that again are a great resource for label information and ultimately where to position Syngenta's products in your spray program. And then last but not least is, of course, our field record keeping guide, a tool that gives you some information and ultimately allows you to track your spray records and so forth, as well as several different brochures on our products. So with that, I want to thank you again for the invitation and the opportunity. Certainly look forward to meeting you and having the opportunity to have a conversation, and you know, when it's convenient to do so, and we're able to do that comfortably. So thank you again, and all the best.
All right. Thanks very much, Eric. Very good in-depth detail coverage on Miravis Duo as a new product, and kind of a refresh on the Aronda side of things as well.
My pleasure. Thanks, Taylor.
A couple questions we do have here. Miravis Duo, does it have Activia, Sclerotinia, and carrots?
Sclerotinia in carrots. Trying to think now, label-wise. Pull up my sheet here. We have suppression of white mold, yes, in root vegetables.
Okay. And then do you mind just touching on Rondus on onions there too? I believe there's some downy control there.
Yep, we'll register for downy mildew in onions, whether it be bulb or green.
All right. Then just understanding we do need to protect new growth as a good spray program. When we look at Miravis Duo as a new product, is it something that's fairly short-lived in the plant, or is it something that remains nice and long-term in that tissue that we do come in contact with?
Yeah, so one of the benefits that we've seen with the adaptogen molecule is that ability to stay within the plant. It's got, when I introduced the molecule, I talked about stamina, right? And that's where, as we think about this active ingredient, lands on the petal, slowly, quickly gets into the waxy layer and essentially creates a reservoir. And it's slow to metabolize and move into the plant. But as I said, the vast majority of it stays within that waxy layer. And as I said, hangs around, I guess, and doesn't break down quickly. So anywhere from, as I said, I think in potatoes specifically, 7 to 14 days. So very effective within the plant.
That's good. Another one, not necessarily related to the products you talked about there, but is there any products on the horizon as far as herbicides and any vegetable crops, or anything pipeline wise you can say, whether too
Yeah,
much detail
I,
of
honestly, I wish it was better news. Nothing that I've been privy to at this point that's imminent. Of course, we at Syngenta have actively communicated that it's our desire to bring 2 new active ingredients globally to the market every year. And no doubt there's some focus in herbicides, recognizing not only in the specialty space, but across row crops as well, of the resistance challenges. So not short-term, Taylor, but certainly it's being looked at and screened intensively, recognizing there's limited technologies, and it continues to be a challenge for farmers.
Yep. Oh, that's good. All right. All right. No, I think that's the bulk of the questions there that we've had come in for you. So
Great.
thanks very much for your time. Appreciate the insight.
No, thank you, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everyone.